want to take a quick diversion into back into SeaDAS itself and just do a quick tour of the menus of the application itself. We've been interacting with it mostly using the toolbar buttons, which are generally shortcuts for menu items. But I just want to make you aware of the menus of the application itself. Beginning, of course, with the typical application menu. We don't really use this very much. You can check for updates, but I don't expect any updates to be happening while we're working with it here. But the file menu is your standard file menu with an open item, various ways to open recently used files, and the open item is in fact the same as we've been using this toolbar button here. Close we haven't really used, but as we delve deeper into SeaDAS and have multiple files open at once, where the file manager will list over here a file and its enclosed bands and as the set of rasters, you may have multiple files in the file manager, and you may come to a point where you realize, well, I'm not really using this one anymore. I've saved all my changes, and we'll learn how to do that in another video upcoming. And you can close this and you can reclaim some memory and resources from your computer. So it's good to kind of manage the file manager. Let's see. So we'll learn about saving your work in another video, but that's a really important one. Session saving is really about sort of saving the working environment setup. That is, what windows are where, and have I moved this over here, and the layout of the screen and so on. It does not save the data that you're working on in that session, so that don't confuse that, so that if you open a session and you don't find the data you were working on that you expected, it's because sessions aren't really the same as saving the work files. Okay, I don't tend to use the session saving feature that much personally. SeaDAS has the ability to import a variety of file formats from a variety of sources. I don't use this so much. Sometimes I'll have a netcdf from some other application or environment. I know it's got latitude, longitude variables in it, so I can open and do some basic operations on it. It may or may not be as fully capable as the kind of data files that we're using from the Ocean Color group, where this application was kind of specifically tailored. I can export to various formats, but I don't use this all that often. I tend to export other and use the image when I want to save this area as I've laid it out with my grid lines and contours and whatever other annotations I might have on it as an actual image file, a JPEG, GIF, or PNG, or whatever. So we'll see an example of that in a future video, but just be aware that there is an opportunity to make pictures with the application. Standard cut, copy, paste, edit menu, not much to say there. The view menu, as we've seen in a previous video, has this all-important reset to default layout, which sort of gets our screen back in order. You can in fact save your layout and load your layout and customize things. I tend to discourage that in these early tutorials, because it's better to have sort of a familiar environment rather than a unique one. You can actually customize what tools are on the toolbars as buttons and so on. You can also access some of the managers directly here from a menu. Okay, we've learned how to change from the file manager to the layer manager with these tabs, of course, but you can also get to them in this view menu. Okay, the layer menu is equivalent to some of the buttons for adding a lat long grid, coastlines, various, contouring and so on, and there's in direct access to the editors and managers for that. We'll learn about that in a separate video when we start putting grid lines and so on the image. Vector menu refers to operations on point and line data. I don't use this so much because other than the pin manager. The pin manager is a useful tool that brings up a window. If it shows as a window, simply uncheck floating and it will park it into the application. And it allows us to actually make or even import a file of point locations. We can use these point locations, for example, if we did data sampling at a particular lat long, or we have a buoy at a particular lat long or something like that. You can actually indicate those with pins on the plot on the data, but you can also sample data at those locations. It's a helpful analytical tool. So the pin manager is just a manager like these others that is not displayed by default, and you access it from this vector menu. Okay, and you needn't necessarily leave it there if you aren't working with pins at the moment, so you can just close it and it will vanish. Let's see, raster. So raster operates on channels, these rasters of data over here, right? So one real important one is the math band. This is where you can combine existing bands or rasters of data in expressions, either arithmetically, actually logical operations to sort of combine masks and so on. So we'll see a explanation of that in a later video, but that's one that you will probably eventually use. Another one that's frequently important is to reproject the data. We'll see an example of that in a separate video. The OCSSW, or Ocean Color Science Software menu, this is a sort of separately developed suite of tools that process the data for making things like we're looking at here: ocean color, chlorophyll products, remote sensing reflectance products, and so on. But unfortunately, those are not developed for the Windows platform. There's a very complicated way in which Windows users of SeaDAS have to set up a sort of a separate machine that's running either virtual machine on their computer, running Linux or whatever, to access these functions. So we won't really worry about them in this class. I may develop tutorials for them later on. But for right now, I'm not going to really focus on this menu. So there are, let's see, tools. I don't actually use this a whole lot. If we come to a need to visit one of these, it will be in another tutorial. Let's see, the analysis. So this is where you can do statistical analysis and so on. Plot histograms. You can scatter plot one channel versus another to see some correlations and so on. You can calculate very basic but pretty comprehensive statistics on your image or a region of an image. There's some very powerful analytical tools here that we'll get into later on. And then just a standard window menu that lets you actually manipulate these tabs. You can simply close the windows. And then, of course, the all-important help menu, which I encourage you to just explore on your own. Just go rummage around and find the ability to, or the information that it offers But there's plenty of online tutorial information to be explored there. So that's really all I wanted to do, was just quickly run through all of these menus, kind of point at the highlights. We will visit these throughout future videos, but that's all I wanted to cover for now.